I'm Kevin Davis, and this is the Catholic Family Podcast. And today I'm going to do something a little bit different. I found a really good thread on Twitter from a guy that I follow, a really good follow called Chivalry Guild. So you can find him at Chivalry Guild. If you go to Twitter, search his name, he's got really good content. Can't vouch for everything, of course, but the stuff that I see is very good. It's very chivalric. It's very old fashioned, very manly in the highest sense. And that's actually what caught my eye today. And he had a thread about Aragorn, who, for many of you, I'm sure you know, he is one of the key characters in the Lord of the Rings trilogy by J.R.R. Tolkien. And in this thread, Chivalry Guide, I don't know his real name, he talks about the differences between Aragorn in the books and Aragorn in the movies. Now, I like both. I like the movies as well, but the books are far, far superior. And part of it is because you can tell Tolkien clearly understood higher morality and high virtue, while the makers of the movies obviously didn't quite understand that to the level that he did. There's several examples for that. Faramir being one of the best examples of how they took away his just intrinsic goodness. But Aragorn is another one. And I'm going to read verbatim what the Chivalry Guild on Twitter says. So please, again, go follow him for more good content. So, from the Chivalry Guild, I sometimes think the flaws of the Lord of the Rings movies are kind of perfect. They are perfect because they tend to show the genius of Tolkien and highlight the superiority of his vision over Peter Jackson's vision. In the process, they demonstrate how relevant Lord of the Rings is for our times. Let's take the whole Aragorn as reluctant king issue. The women who wrote Jackson's script did not want Aragorn to be Aragorn, a man who knew he was made to rule. This seems to be part of a vague modern idea that the only man who is worthy of power is the man who doesn't think he's worthy of it. They had more of an emo Aragorn in mind. The claim is that making Aragorn reluctant gave him a quote unquote stronger dramatic arc. I, for one, never really bought movie Aragorn's supposed conversion to greatness in the movies. It all seemed rather fake. Nor do I buy the argument that it was necessary to compress Aragorn's backstory for runtime. Either way, I'm more interested in what was lost in the alteration, which is a sense of magnanimity. Magnanimity is a great heartedness. A man is magnanimous, according to Joseph Pieper, if he has the courage to seek what is great and becomes worthy of it. Modern Christians have been taught to think this virtue somehow, quote unquote, unchristian, because it sounds like pride. But St. Thomas Aquinas, the universal teacher of the Catholic Church, called magnanimity the jewel of all the virtues, because it decides in favor of what is, at any given moment, the greater possibility of a human potentiality for being. This virtue is right because creatures made in the image and likeness of God are called to lofty things. Contrary to what many assume, magnanimity is not contradictory to humility. Instead, these two virtues need each other, and they work together to help us avoid the wider range of temptations that might come for us. Pride is not the only problem. Despair, laziness, sloth, acedia, all these things seem to be a more lethal threat to most of us today. And it is magnanimity that protects us against this onslaught of dispiritedness. I hope it's clear how incredibly relevant this is, especially at a time when our enemies are ambitious. They are going after it all. They have no scruples about wielding power and crushing their enemies with it. In other words, this is no time for half heartedness on our part, no time for reluctant heroes. We need to rise to meet the challenge with eager readiness. Anything else, and we're already done. We need to be seeing an Aragorn who knows his destiny and is up for it. And please note, I am not talking about becoming ruthless or losing our own souls in the attempt to match our enemy's energy. It is important to note that Aragorn's desire to be king and wield power justly have limits. He is not willing to take the ring for himself, for example. but he knows what is required of him, and he is not about to shy away from it for fear that it's too much for him or that he might screw up like his ancestor did. A perfect concrete example is Jackson's treatment of the Palantir scene. This is deserving of its own thread, which I will make soon. So again, note from me here, Kevin, go follow Chivalry Guide Guild to check out more of his material. Back to the text. When they make Aragorn a reluctant king, they basically bleed him of magnanimity and make him relatable to the viewer. This is ultimately mean suffering from staggering self-doubt. Tolkien, a visionary, had something else in mind. He understood that in crazy times, you need great men with a sense of mission. They, of course, need humility and purity of heart, but they also need a sense of being called to great deeds. As a side note, even if Aragorn had forgotten his duty and destiny to rule, his prospective father in law gives him yet another reason to claim his throne. In Appendix A, Elrond informs young Aragorn, quote, "Therefore, though I love you, I say to you, Arwen and Dumiel shall not diminish her life's grace for less cause. She shall not be the bride of any man less than the king of both Gondor and Arnor." Elrond knows exactly what he is doing. He has the fate of the world in mind. He knows that the world of men needs a king, and there is no future without one. And so he challenges the heir to become the man everyone needs him to be. It's a very rousing challenge Elrond puts to him, and Aragorn accepts. He sets out to quote unquote danger and to toil. On a related note, I wrote previously about Aragorn's extraordinary power of will here. Again, go check that out. So again, finishing with the text there, I think really potently said, and I think it's a beautiful thought of what we need to be. Now, we're not all meant to be fictional characters and fictional kings of fictional places, but we are actually destined to a crown, right? We are called to a crown and to great deeds and to saintly deeds, of course, and to great actions of virtue. And I think that is something that absolutely we've lost so much in our media, especially, but society as a whole, that we see the movies, The Lord of the Rings, and we love them and we like them. We actually like the character of Aragorn, and we kind of even forget that they stole from him, from the actual character, from Tolkien's vision of what he was. And I think that's why I love reading Tolkien and reading Lord of the Rings, because Tolkien understood these high values, these virtues that we so desperately need: bravery, self-sacrifice, courage, magnanimity. And I think that that's something that, again, I highly recommend people go read it. Now, I understand it's not a Catholic text. I understand there are people who think you shouldn't read it. My opinion is that it's a great book by a great Catholic author who can, again, teach us a little bit about what we should be, what we can be, and what, as men, we can strive to be someone worthy of a crown, the crown of sanctity. God bless.